A doctor was savagely murdered in her Florida home in the summer of 2015. Her husband became a suspect, but he had an airtight alibi.
For this week's 48 Hours, Erin Moriarty tells us why police turned to technology to track down the killers. Here's a preview.
I think anytime there is a beautiful, successful woman who is murdered, that's sort of what society pays attention to, for better or for worse.
The mysterious murder of Teresa Sievers, a high-profile physician who practiced holistic medicine, was a huge story for reporters Amy Bennett Williams and Jessica Lipscomb.
People said that she was just a little spitfire, just a short little thing, and always wearing, 4-inch heels, clacking around.
Ladies, remember when walking into a room meant turning heads?
She was telegenic, energetic, she's funny.
On Sunday evening, June 28, 2015, the doctor cut short a family vacation in New York with her husband Mark and their 2 daughters.
She was sort of the breadwinner, and he was the office manager at her practice, and he helped raise the kids.
Dr. Sievers flew home alone, planning to see patients the following morning. Her medical assistant, Sandra Hoskins, became concerned when the doctor was late.
It's now 9 o'clock. Now it's 9:05. Now it's 9:15. I said, where's doctor? I was texting back and forth and no response. Called, no answer.
911, what is your emergency?
I'm at a friend's house.
Teresa's husband, Mark, asked a friend to check on her.
He's out of town, and she's dead on the floor. And there's a hammer at the side, and she's bashed in the back of the head.
And do you know how many times she was hit? 17.
Investigators questioned Mark Sievers, but he had an alibi. Remember, he was with his kids on vacation. But nearly 2 months after Teresa Sievers was murdered, a stunning break in the case.
The sheriff gets up there and tells us simply the name of the first suspect, and then about an hour later he calls us in again and says, we've now picked up a second suspect. It was so shocking.
Shocking because the suspects lived in Missouri, 1,100 miles away, and key evidence was found in a GPS. This case, as investigators were about to find out, has as many twists and turns as the Missouri River.
Oh man, Erin Moriarty is here to talk more about her report. Erin, what makes this case so difficult to solve, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's very unusual for someone to die the way she did. This was a doctor. She was high profile. She did holistic medicine. People described her as the real life Dr. House. Remember Dr. House, who would solve and get people healthy? There didn't seem to be the typical motives. Murder usually requires anger, jealousy. That seemed to be missing. And the husband, the normal suspect, had what was an airtight alibi. He had been in upstate New York and Connecticut at the time. But there was a tip, and it led 1,100 miles to Missouri, and it turns out the husband did have connections there, had a friend there. So what has made this a complicated story is that the investigators say, well, it must be murder for hire. He knows these guys. And yet there's also evidence. Number one, there isn't real evidence that the marriage was in trouble.
Right.
So why would you have your wife killed in that manner? But also that one of the suspects might have been obsessed with the husband.
Obsessed with the husband?
Yeah, that the husband got away from the small town, moved up in the world, this suspect started dressing and looking just like the husband. So it's added a very different kind of, why did this poor woman die?
Well, you spoke to 2 reporters covering Teresa's murder. What did they tell you about the marriage that they had?
Well, and that's the other thing. Sometimes one of the things I hate about my job is, like, you see this perfect on the outside marriage, and then unfortunately when someone is murdered or there's a crime, nothing secret, and apparently they had much more of an open marriage than anyone guessed. There were a lot more people involved in this marriage. That's just very sad to have that out there. And of course that will also, I think, enter into when this finally goes to trial.
Right.
Erin, we also want to turn your attention to the shocking testimony, really shocking testimony heard this week at the pretrial hearing of real estate heir Robert Durst. He's accused, as everyone probably knows if if you watch that HBO show, murdering his friend Susan Berman just over 16 years ago. Erin, you've been reporting on the Durst case for over a decade. Forget the HBO show. I mean, you've been on this story for a long time.
Through all the ups and downs,
right?
Through when he went to trial, you know, he was charged with murder in Galveston and he was acquitted. All right, so this is, you're right, this is shocking testimony. First, let me just give you a little bit of background on this, is that this is pre-trial. This is not the trial yet. And this individual was listed as a secret witness. In fact, he came through a back door in the courtroom, and he was accompanied by protection guards, because he's afraid that because Durst still has $100 million that he could be killed if he comes. This is a longtime friend of Robert Durst. He worked, and his wife still works for the Durst Realty Company here in New York, real estate company in New York. And he says, but I mean, there'll be a lot of questions raised about this, but he says that Susan Berman, number one, told him that Durst killed his first wife, Kathy, said that. And he even says at a dinner, Durst said to him, and in reference to Susan Berman, the victim in this case, that it was either her or me.
Wow.
Insinuating that he may have killed, did kill Susan Berman. Now, I think now the defense has not done the cross-examination. That will happen today, and I think they're going to say, really? You're telling us this now 16 years later?
That's the question I was going to ask.
Yes,
if you knew
exactly.
that information.
Well, this man, Nick Shaven, says he did tell the New York State Police, a particular investigator. But why didn't he tell then Janine Pirro when she was the Westchester County DA? Look, there's a lot of questions, but it's very damaging. And there's a side of me wondering whether the prosecutors in LA are just trying to push him to plead. This, you know, Durst is 73.
Right.
He'll be 74 in April. Just plead. You don't have that much time. Take a deal.
Right, exactly. Erin Moriarty, thank you so much for coming by.
Erin's full report, 1,100 Miles to Murder, is on 48 Hours tomorrow night. That's at 10, 9 Central, only on CBS.